hope you enjoyed this episode of the Day One Cricket Podcast. We did lose about half the conversation, which I haven't managed to recover, but we have the rest of it with Toby Reynolds, so please enjoy the rest of the conversation.
All right, so we had some technical issues, but we are back now. I might have to edit this out. We'll see how it goes in post production. But I think we're at the point talking about Steve Smith, his comments on the pitches in Australia, and whether you think England have made the right call with their seam attack. Do you think they should have prioritised different seamers? Was there anyone else they could have picked?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, this. I mean, Sam Cooke, I guess, is the big one. And I know a few people in Australia are a little bit surprised they haven't picked a kind of English-style seamer. Matt Potts, I guess, does it a bit. But even then, I would say he's kind of a little bit more suited to Australia because of his kind of relentlessness. That's probably his biggest strength, really, is the fact he can just get through so many overs as much as anything else. But he's not quite as quick as the others. Sam Cooke, I would have loved to have seen. The second he didn't play against India, I think everyone knew he wasn't going to get a chance in Australia, and he was basically he's not even gone with the Lions, which I think already shows that they're looking for 4 years down the line rather than for this tour with the Lions, because he was so impressive last year when he came down with that kind of England A side. So I'm a little bit disappointed he's not got a chance. Matt Fisher, I really like as well at Surrey. I really liked him. A lot of people kind of forget he played that one test match against the West Indies just before Bazball kind of came into play back in 2022. And even back then, I thought, I really like looking at him. He's quite a tall guy, hits the pitch pretty hard. He's not express pace, but he's not, particularly slow either. He's kind of in that sort of early to mid kind of 80s hotspot where a lot of the English seamers are. So I think he would have been pretty exciting perhaps to see, but he's not really, again, had any opportunity. He struggled a bit with injuries, but did impress, I thought, this year with Surrey. And yeah, otherwise, I think the way that England's kind of seamers have been picked over the last years, Ollie Stone is maybe the only other one who has had a sort of a significant part in this England setup that isn't going with them now. I mean, obviously Anderson, Broad, Wokes have all retired. Robinson was moved on from a couple of years ago now, but Stone played 3 or 4 tests last summer. A lot of people forget, against Sri Lanka and the West Indies. I think maybe he didn't play against the West Indies, but he played at least 2 of those tests against Sri Lanka. And again, looked okay. Didn't look brilliant, but kind of was in that kind of inner circle. And I think the fact Jofra and Wood are both fully fit probably means he's the one who's missed out. And the fact he's been injured for a lot of the summer just means England have kind of forgotten about him, I think, as much as anything else. I think this kind of seam attack of, 6, 7 of them was always going to be pretty much nailed on, I reckon.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, I guess my concern was how many tests, how are you going to spread out Wood and Archer? Are you going to try and gun them all together? Because you got sort of 2 4-over spell bowlers, really, in the same team, and that gives you less flexibility because you don't have a workhorse there. Bryden Cast can do it, but I guess you've got Stokes as well.
Yeah, I reckon they're going to try and play Wood and Archer in 4 of them each, because Wood played 4 last time out and didn't seem to have issues. Obviously, it's a little bit dependent because he's a bit older this time. He's not quite played as many tests leading up to it, so they might rest him a little bit more. But I reckon Archer, they're thinking 4 tests. I reckon they play him probably in all of the first 3, and you rest him perhaps in Boxing Day and play him in the 5th, or you maybe just play him in the first 2, rest him in Adelaide, play him in the last 2. But I think they're probably heading into it thinking we want to try and get 4 out of Archer. They probably then want to get at least 3 out of Wood. You probably play Wood in the 1st, the 3rd, and maybe the 5th, 4th or 5th, possibly both again, depending on how he comes out of it. And then, a mix of Atkinson, Carson, and Tongue throughout the rest. Interestingly, the fact that they picked that, and I'm sure we'll get onto it, that Lions test, or the test against the Lions, the fact they went for 4 seamers in that and didn't pick a spinner, perhaps hints at what their 11 may be for that first test in Perth.
Yeah, I guess knowing how England operate, they tend to pick their first choice team in the warm ups. I guess the interesting one is Tongue, because he's sort of very good against the tail, but he can be a bit wayward. So I guess if you're playing Tongue, you do want the backup. But how do you reconcile that with getting sort of a spin option in? Do you think Jacks will play a test match this Australian in summer?
Oh, that's a really tricky one. I would have said, well, I think there's a couple possibilities as to why Jacks plays. I think the first one, and probably the main one why he was selected, was because was almost as a Ben Stokes backup as much as anything else. Obviously, partly as a Shoaib Bashir backup. But I think they probably thought, if Stokes goes down injured, what is the plan? Because you saw, obviously, he wasn't able to play in that 5th test at the Oval against India, and they went to Bethel rather than to Dawson as their spinner, and looked to kind of keep their top, kind of have 6 out, so 7 out and out batters, and 4 seamers below. And I think they probably saw Bethel in that, and maybe seen Bethel a bit more since, and thought, we're not sure he's the one for Australia. Him and Root, they probably didn't trust him, and you could see that Pope in particular didn't trust them at the Oval. They only bowled, probably 10 overs or so between them, maybe a couple more. They were basically barely used. And when they were used, it often gave up a little bit of pressure and allowed India through. So I think they probably thought Jax is perhaps a little bit more of an all-round option with the ball in hand. He obviously has a test match 5 for, or 6 for possibly even, I think it was, against Pakistan on debut. One of the many England bowlers who has a 5 for on debut under this Bazball regime. So I think they probably, it was out of the blue, but I think that was probably their original thought process behind him. And also, I guess they think he just strengthens the batting as well. If they really think Bashir is offering nothing, because they have thrown absolutely everything into Bashir, which I kind of don't mind. I think when you look at English spinners who have succeeded in Australia, it's pretty much just Graham Swan in the last, in this century. It's basically only Graham Swan, and even then, 2013-14, he was finished by then. I think he had a few injuries and stuff, but that was basically it. He had one series over here that was successful. Otherwise, every English spinner has basically struggled. Like Leach, last time out, Travis Head just hit out of the attack. And I think they probably thought the same thing would happen to Dawson, which I probably agree with. I thought the fact he was unable to make any inroads in that, in those final 2 days at Old Trafford against India, I think was just disappointing to me. I think he is a good spinner, but that was kind of really where he had to kind of really prove his worth. If he'd gone in and picked up 4 wickets, 5 wickets, even 3 and helps England win the game by bowling really tightly with, quite aggressive fields and picking up a couple of wickets, and that turned the tides, I think he could have bowled himself into the Ashes very comfortably and possibly overtaken Bashir kind of out of nowhere. But I think that would have been his opportunity. And the fact he didn't do that, I think, was obviously it's unlucky. It's one test, it's one innings.
Yeah.
I think the fact he wasn't able to do that basically meant he was then going to be ruled out. And you saw they moved on from him very quickly, despite him now having a central contract. And so I think they therefore had to move on to someone else. I thought they might go Rian Ahmed personally. I thought the allure of a leg spinner might just get them and kind of the magic behind it all. And now he's injured, so he's definitely not, because I thought they might even pick him up and call him, up from the Lions squad to the main squads after the 2nd test or 3rd test before the Lions went home. But yeah, obviously he's not going. And I think Rob Key has spoken about it well, saying they didn't want to break him, basically, which I think is very sensible, perhaps more sensible than I thought they might be. So I'm a little bit disappointed because I think he's a very good bowler, but I'm sure he'll play 20 Ashes tests in his career. Like, he's a very talented player. Probably what they'll look to move on to at some point in the next couple of years, assuming Bashir does crumble, which everyone seems to think he will. But yeah, I personally quite like Bashir. I think of any English spinner, he's got all of the attributes to succeed. And, I think he's going to be at least as successful as anyone else would. Even if he gets battered everywhere, I think pretty much every English spinner would get battered. I don't think it would be helpful to anyone. So I don't mind it. And I think the upside for Bashir is so high that you kind of can just go all in with him. And yeah, I'm probably very much in the minority, but I quite like Bashir in that respect. I think he was improving a lot over the summer as well. I thought his control had gotten to a new level and was almost back to where he was in India when he first burst onto the scene. So I'm interested to see how he goes. He obviously didn't have the best time of it in that Lions series, and he might not play, to be fair. I'd be shocked if he doesn't play a couple games, but maybe they'll go to Jackson instead. But I personally would at least start with Bashir. I'd like to see Bashir in Perth, I think, just because it's so hot out here. And if you have 5 seamers, as much as you can rotate through them, Joe Root will still have to bowl a fair few overs, just because you don't want to kill all of your seamers in that first test.
No, I agree. I think Bashir, there's lots of attributes with him. I think he's shown that he can sort of handle pressure and come back from that. I think it'll be interesting. I think even if he does get some tap, it might be one of those cases where he goes away 5, 6, 7 years, and comes back Graham Swan-esque. I think Swan played 1 or 2 tests and then got dropped and then really refined his game, because with Bashir, I think you're right. All the attributes are there. He spins the ball hard. It's just that little bit of control and probably nous of knowing how to get batsmen out, which he's lacking. But I think it is pitch dependent, as you said, because if it's a green top, you're putting Bashir on a hiding to nothing. He might bowl 5-6 overs, and you're kind of playing with 10 men there because he can't bat. So I think, I'm with
that's
you.
maybe with Jax,
I would have loved to see Rehan Ahmed. I can see why Key didn't want to break him, but I think you sort of, you're like, he got really nothing to lose. He can bat. He might get you 100.
Yeah, exactly. I think he could have done a pretty similar job to Jax as well in that respect, that you almost toss him the ball. I think Jax is a bit more of a containing spinner. Rehan Ahmed maybe is a bit more of a game changer, which again would have been quite interesting. The one thing I think would be interesting to see with Bashir is I reckon he'll get Travis Head out at some point, probably a couple times in the series, on like 70, 80 odds, maybe even after 100. It might sound like terrible if Travis Head's hit him around a little bit, but to still get Travis Head out for, under 100, probably still saving yourself. You could save yourself 100 runs by getting him out just out of nowhere. Similar with Smith, if you can just kind of get them to get themselves out. Smith less likely so, but I can see Travis Head looking to just take on Bashir a few times, getting it wrong, sending one straight up, because Bashir has that extra bounce from his height and his overspin. And actually, if you can get ahead a couple times in a series, then I think that's almost a success with Bashir, because it will be at least as good as, if not better than, any other English spinner will be able to do.
I completely agree. I think out of all the English spinners, is he the person who's probably going to get you the most wickets? Yes, so you can argue as much of how bad you think Bashir is or lack of control, but it's like we've seen all the other options. Dawson, he can contain, but he's not what England want in terms of the aggressive option. If you're looking for solely, we want a spinner who can pick wickets in Australia, I think Bashir is the option, and that's why they've gone with him. But I guess moving on slightly from that, the batting lineup, you think it's all settled? You think there's no debate over Pope or Bethel? And what would you have done if you were a selector? Would you have stick or twisted?
Yeah, I'd have gone for Pope. I think Bethel is extremely talented. I think this could be, Pope's series. He loves the flat track, which it could be. Obviously, we've talked about the fact it could be a bit green scenery, but he also loves it. A first test. Maybe he's gone too early with his hundreds against the Lions. He gets
alleged 100. There was a bit of debate over the. I looked and it was like 60 on the scorecard, and then they posted the scorebook or something like that.
Yeah, who knows what happened? But yeah, well, he made 100 in the first, 90 in the second. Supposedly, this is, of course. But I think I would have gone for Pope. I think personally, I think the simplest way to say it, I think Brendan McCullum and Ben Stokes haven't made many, if any, major errors in the last 4 years, and kind of deserve to pick whatever team they think the best is, because they generally get it spot on. If you look at the amount of success stories within the squad, I think you kind of just have to give them it. And if it does go horribly wrong, obviously, they'll take it. And I wouldn't be surprised if England do lose 4-5-0, if maybe they look to move on from one of them, or Rob Key perhaps goes instead. But I think, England, as we said, are in the best position possible, or at least best position for a while, to go and win at least a test match, maybe even a series in Australia. Yeah, I think Pope is just a little bit more reliable than Bethel. The facts, I think he's probably one of England's best averages at number 3. I think I did a video on it a few months ago now, but the average is the same as Root pretty much at number 3 for England. Obviously, it's been a little bit easier going now than it was when Root was at 3, but I think you can't underestimate how good he has been. Often stat padding a little bit, but the best players always do. You're not going to not cash in against slightly weaker bowling. And the fact that the Australian attack has been that little bit weaker maybe gives an excuse to why Pope should be picked.
Yeah, I think with Pope as well, I think people forget that he's 50 average in first class cricket. Everyone always talks about where are with these 50 average players, in county cricket. Like, you've got one here,
yeah,
and you've got someone who's consistently proven for the best county team in England that you can score runs. I just think it's sort of, I think it's a mixture of position. I think if he was batting, England is so stat lower down the order. I think if he was batting 5, I think he would have come good by now. I think he's had to bat 3 and adapt his game, and that's probably harmed his average. But I think he's a good player. I think on Australian pitches, does he have that sort of Root-esque tendency to sort of flash outside off? I think he's got to guard against that. But if it's slightly sort of more seamer-friendly pitches, maybe there'll be a bit less bounce and he'll get away with it. But I think definitely he's a talented player. He's got a lot of skill.
I think the thing people kind of forget as well is if it does go wrong with Pope and he basically just makes 4 ducks in the first 2 tests, you can then go to Bethel. I'm not sure you could do that the other way around. I'm not sure if you go to Bethel, for the first test, if he makes, 2, string of low scores in the first 2 or 3 tests, I don't think you can go back to Pope because I think you've pretty much broken Pope by then. You can't, the whole point of why I think Pope has been as successfully as been is because he's been given this lifeline and the ability to fail. And which means that when he is in, he is so good. His conversion from 30 to 100 and 30 to 50 is so impressive. And when he gets going, he goes big, and that's what you really need. Guys like him and Crawley, they talk about it a lot, but they're match winners because when they really go big, they can take games away from opposition. That Pope innings in India, for example, was extraordinary. That 196, that won England the only Test match they won in India that series. Similarly, in the first Test this summer, Pope scores 106, whatever it was, against India. And again, that, as much as that chase on the last day was, what everyone remembers, without Pope making that ton on earlier in the test, England would have, been well out of it and had to chase 500, possibly 400 plus in that test and probably wouldn't have gotten anywhere near as they did.
No, I agree. I think sometimes Pope, including by myself, gets unfairly criticised. But if you actually look at his record, I guess there are caveats with the stat padding. But if you look at his record, good player. It's just, I think time will tell. And you make a very good point on going from Pope to Bethel. I think you can do. But if you back Bethel, he's 5 tests. And if it's 10 noughts, you're back him for 10 noughts, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think the interesting thing with Pope is and I don't think he'd admit this, I don't think he even necessarily thinks it, but I think the best, thing that could happen to Pope would be Jamie Smith goes down injured. If that happens, Pope gets kind of a free run at number 7 because he's the only other keeper in the squad. Bethel goes at 3, which I think kind of fine, go with it, whatever. And Pope probably fine. He might bat at 6, but by the way, he's batting at 6 or 7 in much more friendly conditions to a batter because the ball will be older, the pitches will be a bit flatter. He'll be in the perfect position possible, and you saw how well he did in New Zealand this time last year, I think it was, or at least last winter. That was kind of peak Pope coming in at 5 or 6 again, and looking really, really impressive on that front. And that's kind of what he does. That people remember that tour for Bethel kind of being a breakout star. I think he averaged pretty similar to what Pope did. Pope hit a couple 50s on the way, having basically been given the gloves less than 24 hours out from the first test.
The 50 Reds, you can't hate those. I guess sort of moving on to a couple of England batters who probably haven't spoken about as much. But Joe Root, do you think this is the century coming? Do you think Matty Hayden's going to be running around? I can't remember which stadium he said he was going to run around.
Yeah, MCG, he said. So I'll have to do the Adelaide Oval, I guess. Get sacked from my job if he doesn't.
Do you think Rooty has got it this summer? Do you think he's done anything differently? Or do you think he's just back in his game and it's just a matter of time?
Yeah, I think he's just backing his game. I think the fact that he's got a much more stable top 3 ahead of him, helps so much. The fact he's not coming in. Well, when he's batting at 3, it was crazy. He's inside the first 10 overs pretty much every game, it felt. At least now, I think he's sort of probably averaging, I think probably 60 or 70, for 2 by the time he comes in, getting an extra, 10 overs probably in the pavilion after being out on the field. I think that definitely helps him. I think McCullum, and he's talked about and credited McCullum a lot. The way he thinks about his game now, I think he's a lot more ruthless now than he probably ever has been in his career. Obviously, leading into the last Ashes in Australia, he was in the form of his life, scored well over 1,000 runs in the calendar year. But I think now is perhaps as ruthless as he's ever been, and his conversion, is been spectacular. The way he goes from 50 to 100. When you look back 10 years ago, that was the bat that everyone used to beat him with. His conversion rate was terrible. Smith, Kohli, Williamson would just, 1 in every 2 50s at least would be turned into 100. Root was 1 in every 4, 1 in every 5. He made 50 more than any of them, but he made 100 less than any of them. I think now Root has just got it spot on. I think there's still a lot of question marks because you know, because there won't ever not be question marks if you've not done it in a country. But a lot of greats have failed in other countries. Ricky Ponting's had a pretty terrible time in India, for example.
Yeah, he scored
But I think
100 and that was it. And
exactly, yeah.
apart from that, he's probably averages 30 odd, I think. He hasn't done anything in
Yeah,
India apart from that.
possibly even less. You know, would you rather? It's an interesting one. Would you rather Joe Root scores 100? You know, probably it would be a match for 100, but scores 100 and averages 20 in the series, or would you rather he averages 38 or 40, but you know scores a load of 80s? It's probably more useful if he averages more. You know,
Yeah.
it's a bit of a silly one that the fact he hasn't scored 100, you know, is terrible. He does still have a lot of good innings within him in Australia. That 80 odd, I think it was 17, 18, made 80 odd in the first test or something like that, and you know was
Was there
all
one he
but there
retired
to
to make?
hundreds. Yeah. But I think I don't know. I would be surprised if he doesn't make 100. I think you know that's probably all he's thinking about going into it. Obviously, he'd 1,000,000% he'd rather the team wins the series or wins a couple of test matches than he makes runs. But he knows that if he makes runs, if he makes hundreds, England's chances of winning just skyrockets. And I think that's the key. Is he wants to make hundreds, not for him, but for the team. Like he is the most selfless guy in cricket. He is an absolute badger. He loves it. He will spend hours in the nets, but he does it because he wants to be the best himself, but also he wants his team to be the best.
No, he's definitely a team out. I think there was that story on Joss and Brody's podcast where he took Joss Butler to Sheffield Collegiate Recruit round halfway through an
Yeah.
Ashes series to throw some tennis balls at him, which is actually quite a nice story. And then I guess the other battle I want to talk about and whether no one's really questioned it. I guess there was comments and then everyone else started doing well and it sort of got forgotten about is Ben Stokes' batting. Do you think that's crucial? Is that sort of a bonus given where he is with his bowling?
I think it's almost a bonus just because I think, you know, he's a true rounder. And the fact his bowling, I think also the fact Jamie Smith is there is incredible because Smith is a top six batter. Smith will end up batting 4 or 5 for England. I have no doubt in that. So I think that in itself kind of gives Stokes a bit of an out. But I think also as he's an all rounder, so he's obviously, you know, bowler, fielder, but captaincy as well. I think that's actually his most important trait, his leadership skills on and off the field. I think everyone is behind him 1,000,000%. And so that kind of is all that matters. As long as he's fit and playing and able to captain on the pitch, that is his most important trait, I think, in some ways. His bowling obviously is going to be crucial. Picked up a brilliant 6 for, you know, probably 6 of the best deliveries I've ever seen against the Lions. And Australia will be quaking in their boots.
6 long hops. That was an interesting package. That was, he woke up in the morning, 6 for Ben Stokes. Yeah, it must have been a good spell.
I think every single person must have had, unless you were watching it, which I don't know if it was being streamed or not, but I couldn't find it anywhere. But yeah, and I remember every single person must have had the same reaction. You saw, oh my God, Ben Stokes 6 for, no way, he's back, baby, let's go. And then you see the ECB or whoever it was share it on Twitter, and you just see first ball, short ball, pulled to mid wicket. Okay, yeah, fine, it happens. You know, it's caught mid wicket. Next one, out in the deep at square leg. Okay, same again, out in third, fourth, out in the deep, fifth, into mid wicket again. All 6 on the leg side, exactly the same shot, that kind of half pull, half slog, all identical. And every single time it happened, my heart just dropped a little bit more. I was like, no, not again. And it just went from bad to worse. And he was still picking up wickets, great, but I think he was getting frustrated that it was the same every time. Every England fan, every comment I've seen from England fans about it on Twitter, from Australian fans, it's just been taking the piss as much as anything else. But he's still bowling. That's all that matters.
I think some gamesmanship from Australia with that pitch they produced for that eighth game. It was a sort of slow, turgid pitch. And I don't think it's going to be anything like that, which they'll face in the Ashes. So interesting that, you know, I think England generally dish out good pitches and good quality opposition when touring teams come out. So kind of a shame that Australia didn't do the same for England, which is understandable, but I guess you want to see good cricket as a neutral. So yeah, interesting. But I think given time, let's finish off with some of your predictions, Toby. So I'll put you on the spot. The highest run score on each team and overall, who are you going for?
Highest run score on each team, I reckon Travis Head for Australia. It's probably a bit of an easy one. It's between him and Smith. It's got to be. I think Head. Actually, no. I think Steve Smith will be the highest scorer for Australia. I think Head will make a few massive contributions, but Smith's just going to churn out runs. He's just going to, you know, score 500-600 runs, average 50, just one maybe massive, you know, double ton, couple tons, few 50s, just kind of churn them out and really annoy England. English leading run scorer, I reckon I'm tempted to say Ollie Pope,
We're
but I don't think
testing.
he'll be able to keep it up for long enough. I reckon after 3 or 4 tests, Pope could be up there, having made a big ton at some point, couple 50s. But I reckon it'll end up being. I want to go Zach Crawley. I think Zach Crawley will go under the radar. I think pitches are made for him in Australia a little bit. He had a couple really good knocks in that 21, 22 series. I think he was quite impressive back then without being overly impressive. He had a pretty poor tour, but also a few decent knocks, if you kind of get what I mean. So yeah, I'm going to go with out of nowhere, Zach Crawley. But Brooks is going to be up there as well.
England's batting lineup on paper is stacked. It's very stacked.
I think they'll all score runs is my prediction, except Duckett. I think Duckett will be the underperformer.
Yes, one of them's. Yeah, it's interesting because all the techniques are there, but I'd say Duckett and Pope maybe have question marks on, but depends on the pitches. And then I guess leading wicket taker, who are we going with?
Leading wicket taker for Australia. I mean, you kind of got to say Mitch Starc just because he's still fit. I mean, I assume Hazelwood and Hazelwood and Cummins will both be back for at least the second, maybe the third test. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're back for it. I reckon Stark may end up playing all 5 or at least 4 of the 5 just because they kind of have to. So I think like before Hazelwood's injury, I thought Hazelwood would pick up wickets and be their best bowler. And he'll probably be back for the second test. I'm going to go with Hazelwood.
Yeah, Hazelwood probably. And then I guess, like, who are you most looking forward to watch? Obviously, you said Brooke, but I guess, is there anyone you think's not been talked about and you're raring to see them in Australia? There's a couple of players I have my eye on, but I'll let you answer before I go.
I mean, I'm interested to see Jofra. I think how Jofra Archer
me.
goes. Yeah, because he's been hyped up in quite a good way, I'd say, because he is exceptional. The way he can bowl just is like nothing else England have right now. If he gets it right and his fitness is fine, he could be that difference maker. If he plays 4 tests, for example, he is going to be the one. So I think it's probably going to be Jofra for me. And I think he's probably the leading wicket taker for England as well, Jofra.
I agree. I think Jofra's, when he's on form, like that first test back versus India, just the way he got Jaiswal was just like he's back. He doesn't quite have that like 95 mile an hour ball anymore, but he's still got 90 mile an hour on a length, and it's just so exciting to watch when he's on form. It's just whether he can keep it up. And then I guess the major prediction is score prediction. Who do you think will win the Ashes, Toby?
So I had Aussies 3-2 for the whole way up until that Cummins announcement, and probably up until the Hazelwood announcement. Hazelwood's injury perhaps turns it to England 3-2. I don't know. I don't want to think that. I don't want to think England are favourites, but I think they may be. I think I'm going to stick with my gut and still go with Australia 3-2. Part of me thinks it's going to be another 2-2 draw because that's just what England seemingly do against these big teams. But I think Australia 3-2, which I think is still a success. You know, if England win more games in this series than they have in the last 3 in Australia, that's definitely a success. Whether it's also a disappointment, I think it very much could be because Australia are here for the taking. I think Aussies 3-2. What do you think?
I think 3-1 England. I think one test there might be a bit of rain, but I generally think if you look on paper, that England batting lineup, I think they could fire. And then I think you look at the bowling lineup, Jofra Wood, you're going to get big players out. If you're thinking a couple of test matches, all you need to do is get Steve Smith out twice and Travis Head burgle him. If you've got Jofra who can, he almost killed Smith on Air Lords that one time.
Still never got him out though.
You still made 80 odd not out. But as in, you think about that and you're like, yeah, they've got the bowling. If there's a pitch with a bit of spice in it, you've got Jofra Wood 3 tests, Gus Atkinson.
Yeah,
Australia under pressure against Duckett with Brendan Doggett bowling and Nathan Lyon, trying to hold an end. You can see it unravelling for Australia. That's all I can say. I can see it going horribly wrong for Australia in a couple of tests and then sort of really panicking. So I hope that's the case because I do want to see a good series. But yeah, that would be my prediction.
I personally want to see it going 2-2 into Sydney. I think as much as I'd love England to win 5-0, that's not going to happen. I would think 2-2 going into Sydney. Like you can't complain if that's the case. Even if England are 2-1 up going into Sydney, for example, I think similarly, the fact that Australia will be able to really fight back and get a 2-2 draw, they would not want to lose. They would not want to lose the Ashes because they still have it from 4 years ago. So I think 2-1 or 2-2 heading into Sydney with everything on the line would be an incredible series, and I think that could very much happen. I think it's quite likely that could be the case.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. And if that is the case, we'll definitely have to catch up on another podcast after that and talk about the series. But Toby, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for hopping on. I guess, where can people find you? Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, even if you want to shout that out.
Yeah, it's all @Reynolds_sport. I think that's all of my handles on everything now. So yeah, feel free to drop me a follow. My Instagram has taken, I've not done much recently, but at some point I'll get back to it. Similar to Twitter, yeah, LinkedIn, Toby Reynolds. Yeah, I don't know how else you can kind of find people on LinkedIn, but yeah, feel free to look for me.
No worries. And are you planning on sort of bringing back the content for the Ashes? And I quite like
Yeah.
some of your short form stuff. It was very cool.
Yeah, I might have to. I'll have to be a little bit careful there if I'm working for Australian cricket media of some sort. They might not be best pleased if I start, slagging off all of the Australian players who play for South Australia, such as Travis Head, Alex Carey, or Brendan Doggett. I might find myself out of a job pretty quickly.
Don't worry, we'll just blur those out. You can just have a go at David Warner for some of you seven
Exactly, yeah.
sidelines. If it all fails, just go back to the old players.
Yeah.
But thanks again, Toby, and I'll
Cheers for having me, mate. It's great fun.